Hi, everybody. Welcome to Over 50 Starting Over. I'm Barry Edwards, and I just got done with an interview that you're going to see now. And I had the best time with Doug Noll, who is one of the world's most interesting guys. He went from being an extremely successful litigation lawyer to becoming a peacemaker for the past couple of decades. And if you listen to this on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or whatever, this is one time I suggest maybe you want to pop over and just take a look at the YouTube for a bit to see the gleam in this guy's eye. He not only will help us with our interpersonal relationships in this interview, but he exudes what I really wanted O5O to always be, and that is he went for happiness. You know, he pursued all the highest acclaim in the first half of his life, and then had an epiphany and decided to pursue his true passion, and it really comes through with him. And so I think we could learn a lot from this podcast on several different levels. And thanks, and I really do hope you enjoyed as much as I did. And here we go. And having a couple of laughs here, Doug Noll. And Doug is a mediator, speaker, and award-winning author of De-Escalate, How to Calm Barry Edwards Down in 90 Seconds or Less.
I got a Nobel Peace Prize for that.
It's how to calm an angry person down in 90 seconds or less. This is really interesting. I listen to a lot of your podcasts, and I love your backstory. Just want to say you were a very successful commercial trial lawyer. I want to talk to you about that right now. For 22 years before transitioning to leadership development, problem solving, and peacemaking. Co-founder of the award-winning Prison of Peace Project. You heard that right. Prison of Peace Project, in which he teaches murderers in maximum security prisons to be peacemakers and mediators. We got to talk about that, Doug. I mean, you 22 years as a very successful trial lawyer, as I recall, in California, Southern California. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Central California. Mm-hmm.
Wild ride. Why, how, what?
Okay, so the quick Reader's Digest version. I grew up in Southern California. I was pretty disabled. I was born partially blind, crippled, couldn't walk till I was 3, bad teeth, bad ears, left-handed. I was a mess, except for my intellect. I was born with a good mind. And even though my childhood was a mess, I grew up in affluence, but even though I grew up in affluence and privilege, my childhood was a mess. But ultimately, I went back to Dartmouth College, Ivy League, came back to California. When in those days, in the early 70s, late 70s, mid 70s, it would be mid 70s. If you didn't go to med school, you went to law school out of an Ivy League college. So that's what I did. I came back to California. Didn't want to go to LA. Hated LA. Didn't want to go to the Bay Area. So I love the mountains. So I moved to Central California. I went to law school in Sacramento, up in the Sacramento Valley, and then moved down here to Central California. I live in the exact center of the state, and right now I'm 60 miles from Yosemite and 40 miles from Kings Canyon, Sequoia National Parks, 10 acres in the mountains. It's beautiful. Anyways, I became a trial lawyer and tried cases for 22 years. In the mid 80s, I took up the martial arts, and when I turned 40 in 1990, I was awarded my second degree black belt, and my teacher said, "Go learn Tai Chi. You're an asshole. You're mean, you're tough, you can kick ass, you're a trial lawyer. If I teach you anymore, you're going to start hurting people." So he sent me off to Tai Chi. And Tai Chi has two really interesting paradoxes. The first is, the softer you are, the more, let's see if I get this right. The softer you are, the stronger you are. The more vulnerable you are, the more powerful you are. Soft to be strong, vulnerable to be powerful. Did not get this for a while. But eventually I did get it until around 1996, 46 years old, in a courtroom, trying a case, doing my usual thing. And the thought came to me, what the heck am I doing in here? And after that trial, I had one of my many different avocations is whitewater. So I was on a whitewater rafting trip with a bunch of friends up on the main salmon in Idaho. And I spent a week all by myself in my raft with my, a group of us. And but I had my raft all to myself and thought about how many people I'd really served as a trial lawyer, and concluded that I really had not served a lot of people, even though I was very, very successful. So after that trip, I came back and I learned about a new master's degree program in peacemaking and conflict studies being offered at Fresno Pacific University, and I enrolled. So in 1997, I was a full-time master's degree now I'm 47 years old, full-time master's degree student, 10 units per semester, three-quarters time law professor at our local law school, and a full-time trial lawyer. And that was the end of my first marriage.
I didn't know that part. That's the first time you've divulged that.
Yeah, it was rough, but it was not because of all of that. It was because I was emotionally immature and had a lot of emotional baggage that I had not really worked through yet. So ultimately, though, I graduated, got my degree, had many, many discussions with my partners about they hated the idea of me becoming a peacemaker. That was really my calling. So one day in November of 2000, less than 2 weeks after I turned 50, I walked away from $10 million, quit being a trial lawyer, and became a peacemaker.
That's amazing. That's amazing stuff.
And never looked back.
No kidding.
And then 10 years later, when I was 60 years old, is when Laurel Coffer and I started the Prison of Peace Project.
Wow.
And today we're in 15 California prisons, prisons in Connecticut. We have a colleague with 14 prisons in Greece, and we have startups in northern Italy and Nairobi and Denmark.
I want to ask you more about that, some stories. I heard you relate a couple of stories that were pretty mind-blowing, in my opinion, about you're talking the most hardened of the hardest people.
That's right.
Eventually, I want to start there because I want to eventually get back to me and my relationship, and as such, all of us. And then I want to just talk about our society as a whole too, and the role that this peacemaking, these techniques play with that too. But let's back up here. How did you get started on this? How did this idea formulate about going to prisons and making peacemakers out of the most difficult people in the world?
Well, in August of 2009, my very dear friend, almost my sister, Laurel Coffer, called me one day. She's a mediator down in Los Angeles, and we both teach at Pepperdine Law. And she called me one day in August and said, "Hey, you got a minute?" I said, "Yeah." So she read me a letter that was handwritten from a woman serving a life sentence without possibility of parole, going to be in prison the rest of her life, in the largest, most violent women's prison in the world, which at that time was Valley State Prison for Women in Chowchilla, California, about an hour and 15 minutes from where I live. And basically, Susan was asking Laurel if Laurel would be willing to come into the prison and train their network group, which consisted of 150 lifers, to be peacemakers and mediators, because the women, knowing they were going to be in that prison for the rest of their lives, were tired of the violence and wanted some way to create peace in their village, so to speak, because the institution was not doing what it's supposed to do. And it turned out it wasn't, which is why it was the most violent prison in the women's prison in the world. And we said yes. I
want to ask, I'm sorry, I want to interrupt right there, because you said something very interesting that I didn't hear you say before. Is you said that these are lifers. You know what I'm thinking? When I thought you were setting the stage for they have no other hope, so they're recklessly violent. And instead they saw this as, this is where I'm at the rest of my life. We got to make it better than what it is.
Exactly correct.
Yeah,
exactly correct. And it's interesting. It's not the life inmates in prisons that create the violence. It's the young gangbangers coming off the street who are hot and emotionally really screwed up and a mess, and they feel like they got to prove themselves. They're the ones that create the violence. And it was these women who were, well, in our first class of back up. We started in April of 2010 with 15 women, ages 30 to 65, all different ethnicities, all different educational levels. And we devised a very unique curriculum because we recognized that going into prison, we didn't know what the basic interpersonal skill levels of our students would be. So we started at the bottom. We assumed they didn't know anything. Serving life sentences, probably not. So we built up a series of workshops that taught the skills that we thought were essential for peacemaking and mediation. And then when they mastered those skills, then we trained them how to be mediators and peacemakers. And in the first year, we took them from ground zero to being fully certified mediators and peacemakers in 12 weeks, which turned out to be exhausting. Now we do it in a year. But it was overwhelmingly successful. After by 5 weeks into the program, we had 300 women on our waiting list waiting to be trained, and we were saying, oh my God, what are we going to do? Now, this is all pro bono. We're not getting paid a dime for this. No grants, no money. We're paying for everything out of our own pocket. It's our own time. And
about that time, you're saying, why did I leave that 10 mil on the table?
Actually, no. I actually never regretted that. Yes, I don't make nearly as much money today as I used to, but my life is so much more fulfilling. And then, even though it was exhausting, and we were basically burning our professional practices as mediators and arbitrators, this was so satisfying and so powerful that, as I tell people, once you start doing this work, you cannot not do it. It's just compelling. So, and the hours are long, and they're long drives, and they're miserable working conditions, and horrible places to work. This is not a corporate conference center with everything catered. This is a maximum security prison, not designed for teaching, designed for constraining people's behaviors. And it turned out to be incredibly successful. And, story after story after story that has come out of the project. And these women responded. And so by 2013, we've been in there for 3 years, the program was operating pretty much on its own when the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation decided to turn it into a men's prison. So the women got shipped out to other prisons. We said we'd follow them. And ultimately, although we said no many times, we finally had to say yes. And we went back into the prison. It was now called Valley State Prison. And it was a men's prison. And we started Prison of Peace with the men for the first time. And 3 years later, it was self-sustaining. We had trained over 1,000 men in that prison. And finally, the department recognized our work and started giving us some grants to spread the project throughout the state.
What kind of stats did you have in that 3 years with the men? I thought the men would be so much more difficult, and yet
it's just the opposite. I know this is going to sound very misogynist and sexist, but they were actually easier to teach than the women. And there are reasons for that. It's not because they were men and the women were women. It's because of the way that inmates are classified and put into different prisons. With the women, because there are only 2.5 women's prisons in the state, and the women only make up less than 2% of the total population in California, a serial killer can be housed with somebody who stole a Twinkies and got nailed for 3 strikes. So there's no homogeneity in the women's prisons. And mental illness, education, type of crime, propensity for violence, they're all mixed up. In the men's prisons, each prison is much more homogeneous. And so the type of men that we were dealing with at Valley State Prison they were all pretty much the same. And so they were much easier to teach. And the other thing that happens is the men tend to self-regulate their communities a lot better than the women do. And so they're much more, they self-organize their communities a lot better. And the women aren't so good at that. Just because of the lack of homogeneity. So the men turned out to be a lot easier, as it turns out. And that turned out to be true no matter what level we were in. Valley State Prison was a level 2, which is a relatively low level security, but a couple of years later I was in Corcoran, which is a level 4+. It was one of the supermaxes in California, working with gangbangers who were, the first time I met them, we were in shackles and cages. Here I was sitting in this little dungeon, 12 cages in a semicircle around me, and they're all in there with shackles, taking notes and learning from me. 100 feet from Charles Manson's cell. Really? I was in the belly of the beast for 3 years there.
Now, see, no matter what you say about the men being easier, maybe you can say it's misogynistic. I absolutely don't believe that, because we all know men are naturally, on average, just a lot more aggressive. It's our nature. So that's why, to me, it's completely counterintuitive.
Here's what's really strange. This is something that people are going to have a hard time learning or understanding. I've worked with the worst of the worst. And what I learned was that, one, they came from horrible childhoods. Murderers are not born, they're bred. So they were conditioned into violence. Violence was the only form of conflict resolution they knew, and they hated it. Every single one of them hated it. And when we showed them how you can resolve conflict and make peace without violence using all these different skills, we taught them over 250 different skills over the course of our curriculum. They took to it like ducks to water. They became absolute addicts and completely changed. And it to this effect, of those original 15 women, all but, to my knowledge, 3 have been released. And of the 20,000 inmates we've trained, or our trainers have trained in prison and peace in California since 2010, 8,000 have been released on parole, not one report of recidivism. None of our students have reoffended, to our knowledge.
That's astounding. That's absolutely astounding. So you've only been doing this for 12 years?
13 years.
I know that you, as you mentioned, you're probably in about 20 different locations across the world now, correct?
Well, we have colleagues who picked this up, and you know, our next project is going to be in Denmark. Interestingly enough, we're going to go worldwide this year. When the pandemic hit in California, all in-person programming shut down for good. We quit in early March, and then 2 weeks later, the state said no more programming for obvious reasons. So then the state called us and said, well, you got to spend all your money by June. Well, we had like $500,000, $750,000 in grant money, and there's no way we can go into prison, so what are we going to do? Laurel and I had this dream of filming our entire curriculum. So we hired a Hollywood film crew, and we did a high-end Hollywood production, and we filmed our entire curriculum using people who we had trained as inmates, incarcerated people who are now released on parole. They were our best trainers, and we hired them to help us do the training as we filmed the curriculum. It's really, really powerful.
Please tell me.
It's in post-production right now. I'm writing all the manuals, and so but we're almost done with the manual writing. That's been a pain in the ass. And then by the end of the summer, the Prison of Peace curriculum will be available to anybody in the world, because we can subtitle everything in any language, and it's available anywhere in the world for anybody who wants to do this work. Really powerful.
That's amazing. So are you going to put some clips on YouTube, stuff like that?
Yeah, we have a really beautiful 12-minute video on YouTube right now called Pop Mediator Speak. And if you just Google that, it'll come up, and it's a 12.5-minute video, and those are the first women that we trained in that video. The first 2 groups of women we trained at Valley State Prison for Women. It is really, really powerful to watch that video. I still cry. And we made that video in 2012, I think.
Pop Mediator.
Pop Mediator Speak.
Okay, cool. I'm going to look that up when we get off of here. That sounds terrific. And I'll put the link in the show notes along with your book, and I'll put all your links in the show notes.
Actually, yeah, I built a page for your audience. It's called dougnoll.co/startover. Starting over. Let me double check that I've got it right here, since I just did it this morning. Whoops.
Yeah, please repeat that.
Yeah, where's the link? I'm going to put it in the chat for you too.
Okay.
Yeah, it's dougnoll.co starting over.
Okay. Cool. Appreciate that. Okay, so to take this a little further, first of all, Tai Chi, isn't that what Steven Seagal does?
I don't know if he does Tai Chi or not. Obviously, he's a martial artist. I don't know what his primary art is, what he learned.
Yeah.
But Tai Chi is the oldest of all martial arts. It's also one of the most vicious martial arts. Most people.
Isn't that the one that's all like all hand work and stuff?
Flowing stuff like this, yeah. Oh, let me tell you, if you study it as a martial artist and not as a contemplative yoga type exercise, it is deadly. Deadly. And that I didn't realize that at first. I thought Tai Chi, yeah, this is what old people do in the park, right?
Right.
Take that up at 41 years old, and I was completely wrong. It is absolutely deadly.
Does it have a lot in common with judo? No, I wrestled all through junior high and high school.
Right. So if you take judo or jujitsu or any of those grappling arts.
I meant jujitsu, right.
Yeah, you take these grappling arts or Aikido, the same idea. Basically, what you're learning to do is to use the leverage and energy of your opponent against the opponent, and not to use your own energy. Tai Chi is very similar. Tai Chi is the idea is that you're going to be deflecting and moving, and you're working with chi or energy. and you never use your own energy. You're always using your opponent's energy, and whatever they do, you're just moving and flowing with you flow with their energy and then redirect them to wherever you want them to go or wherever you want them to do.
Which is completely the opposite of what you were doing prior, where you were a bull in a china shop.
That's right, and that's why the paradoxes were so hard for me to understand.
Correct. And I see the point of something like the weaker you are, the more powerful you are. And
softer. You're never weak.
Okay.
You're soft and vulnerable to be strong and powerful.
Because of leverage, correct?
Leverage and flow.
Okay.
Leverage and flow.
Okay. Got this in the chat. Copy. Okay. And okay, so how about if we start making this segue? Because I wanted to set the groundwork of how powerful this is. And I'm really not even done with the prison stuff yet, because
we could talk about it for hours, really.
I know it's fascinating because, okay, on the one hand, the amount of accomplishment that you've done in 13 years, you can almost subtract 2 of them because of COVID. We all lost those years out of our lives.
Right.
You made a tremendous lot of progress in that time. But on the other hand, that's not very much time. That goes by quick. What I want to ask you is, we got a movement here going on across America, that the debate, the conflict about DAs letting prisoners out of prison too early, not setting bail high enough and all that. And as I'm listening to different podcasts that you're on and you're talking about it, I'm starting to get an understanding of where they're coming from mentally. Is they're like, they have potential. These are good people that have potential, that need another chance, that are being treated unfairly by the system. But that's only half of it. The other half is what you've been bringing to the table, is the training to give them what they've been truly hungering for and missing. So put these two together, we might be really onto something. So my question is, are you starting to get the feeling that this is going to really blow up in a positive way?
We don't know.
Okay.
We don't know. We face a lot of headwinds, not a lot of headwinds in the United States. And the headwinds we face is that, first of all, the science shows that for every dollar put into rehabilitation in our prison system, the state saves $1,000. Rehabilitation is the only way out of the prison industrial complex.
Yeah.
But that is the problem, because in California, you've got the CCPOA, the California Correctional Peace Officers Association, which is the largest, most powerful public union in California, who resists any rehabilitation, resists any effort to reduce prison populations, because it costs them jobs.
It's a business, yeah.
The business. And on top of that, you've got politicians who feel that the only way they can get elected is by scaring the crap out of the electorate, saying, I'm tough on crime. I mean, where I live in Central California is very interesting. This is the birth of 3 Strikes, Mike Reynolds, and it's also the birthplace of the International Restorative Justice Movement, which is a way of dealing with crime that is completely different than the retributive system. Very paradoxical. So we've got the voters who the likelihood of somebody being a victim of a crime is less than getting struck by lightning in many places in the country. There's some places that are more violent than others, but even living in a violent, like Chicago's going through a lot of violence right now, but even living in Chicago, it's a bounded area where all the violence is. If you live outside of that bounded area in the more middle class, affluent parts of Chicago, the likelihood of you getting mugged is like really small. Yeah. But the media, here's the third problem, the media, because it wants to get eyes on the news, right? Not eyes on pages, will overinflate, over-exaggerate, amplify crime to make it look like it's everywhere. And so between the political forces looking to tribalize and scare people, the public unions wanting to protect their jobs, and the media looking for sensationalism to over-amplify what is true, we get this tough on crime stuff. But when I talk to my friends, especially my conservative friends, I say, do you realize that in California we spend more money on our prison system than we spend on our entire community college, state university, and university system combined?
Now you say that, right? They're not telling you that.
No, I'm telling them, and they say, what?
Yeah.
I said, yeah. Did you know that it costs $250,000 a year to house an inmate in a California prison? If you
Yeah.
take the number of inmates divided by the total budget, it comes out to $250,000 per inmate or something like that. Very, very high. We can send kids to Harvard for what it costs us to put somebody in prison.
Now, see, that's what can see as the antidote. Like, as you said, I am a big, I don't want to say advocate. I speak a lot about the corruption of our government. It's systemic. It goes right into the media, right through every corporation. Healthcare, pharmaceutical is in the fossil fuel industries. They're all in bed together. It's awful. But if you have some politicians speaking eloquently about how they can reduce your taxes by everything you're just saying right there, the extreme burden that the prison system has, and rehabilitate. There's a lot of people that I think would like to say, we have an astounding rehabilitation record. Here are a few stats, and we can in turn reduce the tax burden on our taxpayers by X amount. I think people would eat that up.
Right, but you're never going to hear politicians talking about it because they can't get elected on peace. Media does not talk about peace. Peace is boring.
Yeah.
Peace is unsexy. Conflict is sexy. Conflict gets people excited.
Yeah.
You know, if I'll just give you an example. In the early days of the Ukrainian conflict, the war, you know, there were peace talks, attempted peace talks between the Ukrainians and the Russians. You would see the media cover it in peace talks between Ukraine and Russia fail, and then today in somewhere Poland or wherever they met, 1-2 sentences on what they were meeting about, and then the rest of it was, and in the meantime all these bombings and shellings and everything else goes on. So they immediately, and the picture of tanks and blown up buildings and dead bodies on the ground, nothing about this is the process that they devised, and here's who's mediating it, and here's how it's working, and this is what's going on. It's all boring. People don't hear about that stuff.
You're right. It's all about clicks these days, and it's highly competitive. And we are geared biologically. I know you know this, that we want safety. That's our top number one priority. Right. So what do you seek out? Well, where's the danger? Because I want to know what to avoid.
And I will make irrational choices for safety over my pocketbook.
Yes, very true. All right, we got to get to the nitty gritty on this stuff. Interpersonal relationships, even after 50, many of us struggle with conflict in our relationships.
That's right.
Yeah, and I got to tell you right away, you kind of alluded to this, made me think about it right away. My girlfriend and I, my partner of 13 years, we have a very good relationship, but it's been a long, hard road. We both come from families where anger was by far the prevalent emotion. My father only knew how to express himself in anger.
Right.
And is a typical 70s kind of household. I hate to say that for all of you that had these Norman Rockwell families, God bless you.
Nobody did. That's all bullshit. That's why his Norman Rockwell paintings were so popular, is because they painted a myth that did not exist. 98% of all families are emotionally dysfunctional. Jesus. And they produce emotionally dysfunctional adults. Period. End of story.
There we go. All right. So talk to me. All right. Now I want to say something that's going to lay some groundwork for you, because I heard you in a podcast or YouTube video talk about these interpersonal relationships, and it hit me as like, whoa, wait a minute. We've done couples counseling quite a bit, really. And where we learned that that you don't say you, because it's accusatory. Don't say you do this, you do that, and now what you preach exactly the opposite.
That is so wrong.
Please tell me why. Please.
It's based on the work of Carl Rogers and Thomas Gordon, and to the degree that Gordon and Rogers said don't blame by using you, they are correct. If you have your own emotional experience, you use an I statement. But the science shows that if you want to de-escalate somebody and calm them down, you've got to use a you statement. You have to speak from the speaker's frame. You have to listen and reflect from the speaker's frame of reference. So I would say something like, Barry, man, you're really pissed off. You're angry. You're frustrated. You feel disrespected. Nobody's listening to you. You don't feel heard. You feel ignored. And you're really sad. You feel betrayed. And you're all alone. And nobody gets you. And it just really, really makes you anxious and concerns you.
So
Notice
you're proving empathy.
that's empathy. It's called cognitive empathy, using a skill called affect labeling. And they all get it wrong, and it's still taught today. My niece just got her doctorate, a PsyD in psychology, and she was taught the same crap, absolute same crap. I can't believe it. And where I teach, the people that teach mediation there are teaching these I statements. Total bullshit. And there's zero science to support it. Zero. And not only that, it doesn't work. It's invalidating. It causes more harm than it helps. It really gets me going.
And I want to keep you getting going, because I need to unlearn some of this, because I got to tell you, it's very unnatural for me, because what they say to do when you're talking about I this, I that, is talk about your feelings. I feel.
That's okay. It's okay for you to say, look, I'm really angry and pissed off. So the proper way to frame a problem in a relationship is to say, look, I feel really disrespected and annoyed and angry when I come in and I see socks on the floor that haven't been picked up, because I feel like my time and effort is being disrespected, and I feel like I'm not being loved and cared for. That is okay. In fact, that is not only okay, that is the right way to do it. Now, the other person might say something like, well, I didn't think that leaving socks on the floor is such a big deal. I mean, why are you making such a big deal out of a mountain, out of a molehill? And then your response would be, because that's an invalidating statement, you would say, so you're feeling really anxious and a little bit disrespected that you can't do what you want to do, and you're upset over the fact that you just want to live the life that you want to lead without any interference from anybody else. And all your life, people have always told you what to do, and no one's ever respected you, and you always felt left alone and without love, and you really want to be loved. And the other person will start to cry.
Oh my God.
What's going on.
My girlfriend is 100% Sicilian. And so that said a lot right there, didn't it?
That's right. That's a culture.
Tone means everything.
Tone is more advanced, but yes, it's important.
Mm-hmm.
But the most important thing is to reflect back the speaker's emotions using a you statement. There's brain scanning studies that show why this works the way that it does. And when people come at me with nonviolent communication or active listening, I say, where's your science?
Yeah.
I'll show you mine if you show me yours. And the fact of the matter is there is no science to support that stuff, and there's absolute neuroscience to support what I talk about and what I teach, which is why I teach it. Hey, if that stuff worked, I wouldn't be here talking to you about this. We'd be using that old 1950s crap, and we'd all be happy, but it doesn't work. It never has, never will, can't, won't, doesn't.
What do you think about that? I don't know the terminology about when to validate. This might be part of your gig, actually. But again, in couples therapy, we were taught, okay, to prove that you're listening, active listening, repeat what you think that you just heard from them.
Okay. I am so sorry you got such bad advice.
I thought it was too at the time, let me tell you.
Horrible advice. So there are 4 levels of reflective listening: mirroring, paraphrasing, core messaging, and affect labeling. All right. What you were taught was a very rudimentary, primitive form of paraphrasing. Paraphrasing means that all you're going to do is repeat back the words. You're going to summarize what another person's words are yourself. And paraphrasing has its place. But if you really want to validate somebody, you've got to reflect back to them at the emotional level, where you completely ignore the words. It has nothing to do with the words, and all you do is reflect back emotions, feelings. And when you do that, what brain scanning studies show is that the emotional centers of the brain are inhibited. At the same time, the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex is activated, and people can start thinking again. And they literally calm down in less than 90 seconds.
Do you think of an example to illustrate that a little better?
Yeah. Tell me a quick story about an issue you had with your girlfriend.
Oh boy, you just put me on the spot there. Okay, yeah, I got. Oh, there goes Charlie. Yeah. So last night, she got really mad about something. I don't know what. Apparently, I woke her up.
So you were really, first of all, you were taken aback that she was really angry. All of a sudden, she exploded, and that surprised you, and it caused you felt really anxious,
Yeah.
and you were really confused, and you were upset because you love her and you hate to see her upset, and the fact that you might have been the cause of that upset caused you a little bit of shame and humiliation, even though you were confused and didn't know exactly what happened. And no matter what you did, you felt lost because she couldn't seem to quiet down, and that was really frustrating and upsetting to you.
Anxious was a good word for that.
Anxious, you felt really anxious about it.
Yes, yes, yes. And that was
Oh,
really good. That was a
all
good
right, now
feeling.
stop. Now, what did you just experience when I did that with you?
Um, a bit of relief.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it was like catharsis, like you just pulled
That's right.
something out of me.
That's right. I didn't
Yeah,
pull anything out of you. All I did was label your emotional experience to allow your brain to process the experience that you had. I'm lending you my prefrontal cortex for the 30 or 40 seconds it takes for your brain to process your own emotional experience.
it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so when when I'm on my own and that situation repeats itself, what am I supposed to do?
So ignore the words, take a moment, and allow yourself to process the emotions that your girlfriend is feeling, and then reflect back her emotions with a simple you statement. Oh, you are. And you're going to start off with angry, typically a Sicilian, anger. You're really upset, you're really angry, you're pissed off. You don't feel listened to, you feel disrespected, you don't feel appreciated or supported. And then you might go to, you feel really sad, and you don't feel loved. You feel abandoned. You feel completely unlovable. And the whole thing is just really upsetting to you. If you just said that, just how long did that take? 20 seconds? That'll
Yeah,
calm
I
her.
was wondering if I'd still be alive by 10 seconds into that, though.
You would be,
Yeah.
because our brain, we crave emotional validation. That's the one thing that we want more than anything else, is to be understood by somebody else at a very deep level.
I could back that up irrefutably because of how many times I know that I sucked at it throughout my life, invalidating.
So did I.
Yeah.
And I learned this. I mean, I developed this skill because I didn't have anything else. As a peacemaker, I was walking into these intense conflicts, getting paid big bucks to get things calmed down and solve problems, and I had no tools. And I tried all that active listening crap and nonviolent communication, all that BS. And I took every listening course that I could find, and none of it worked. None of it worked. And I had to devise my own tools. And then several years later, Lieberman came out with these brain scanning studies out of UCLA that just completely changed everything. So I've got skills that science supports.
Okay, how about let's take that throughout the family a little bit. What if you have that? I have friends like this. This is not my situation, but that has the overbearing mother, and that is hard to deal with. Very stubborn, even to the point of her safety's at risk because she's frail, and yet she's very, very emotionally triggered. And
Right.
they have a hard time dealing with.
So here is what's going on. She is not emotionally safe. She has never experienced emotional safety. And so the only way that she can protect herself from feeling vulnerable and unsafe is by biting back hard.
Okay, we got cut off there for a minute, but I was talking about my friend's mother, who's very
Right.
cantankerous, and you were saying that she's never felt valid, emotionally safe.
Correct.
That's
Ever. Ever. So the way you deal with her is you've got to create emotional safety for her. And this will be very frightening for her in the beginning because it's going to be like a little mouse sticking her nose out of the hole, looking around, where's that cat? And the way you create emotional safety is by being non-reactive around her and simply labeling back her emotions very gently. Oh, Mom, you're really pissed off. You're really angry. Stop. Yeah, I'm really angry. Really frustrated. Yeah. Or she'll say, no, I'm not angry.
Yeah, that's more like it. Yeah.
Okay? Well, of course she's angry,
Right.
but she can't accept her own emotions, because to accept her own emotions means for her she has to be vulnerable, and she doesn't get the Tai Chi paradox. To be powerful, you have to be vulnerable. So, so this is a reconditioning process that can take some time, and frankly, I did it with my mother. I mean, unfortunately, I kind of think she's in her last days, last weeks. Don't know. We won't know. But I mean, she's not. She went on a big slide. She's 95 years old. But for the last 15 years, I've had a relationship with her that I did not have before that, because I've been able to use these skills and create, emotional safety for her. It's very paradoxical, because as a child, I want emotional safety from my mother, but as an adult peacemaker, I recognize that I am never going to get that from her. If I want safety for myself, I have to create my own emotional safety. But what the gift I can give her is to create emotional safety for her, so that whenever she's around me or my wife, no matter what, she's always safe. And we always create a place for her where she can say whatever she wants to say. She can behave in any way she wants to behave. And she's always kind, but she can be a little critical. She has been critical in the past, and that's all gone away. And at least with us. And so that's the secret. But you have to be in a place where, number one, you want to do that for your mother, and two, you have the patience to do it, and three, you've developed the skills to do it. So it takes three things to be able.
Now, I want to get to something. It's related to that. It's basically, this is a technique I heard from you on a couple of podcasts, YouTube videos, that anybody that's difficult, this is the technique that you use it with anybody that's difficult. It could be the mother situation that we're just talking about, and that is not listen to the
words. Ignore the words.
Yeah.
We're totally focused on words because that's what we were taught as children. But if you're going to be really sophisticated at this and you really want to calm people down, the words mean nothing. So the very first thing you have to learn how to do is take those angry words and turn them into white noise. You don't, whatever you're saying, I'm not listening to you. Yeah. And that gives you the freedom to focus on what emotions are you experiencing right now. And emotions come in 6 layers. So one of the things that I teach is that in order to understand people's emotions, it's unstructured data. Emotions are unstructured data for most people because they've never been trained in how to structure emotional data and look at it and process it. And our brains do not do well with unstructured data. We can't process unstructured data. So here's the structure. Think of a 6-layer cake. Anger, disrespect, fear, shame, humiliation, embarrassment, and guilt, sadness and grief, abandonment, and unloved.
Is that in order?
No, well, it goes from it's not, it's in order. I picked those because the top ones are the most common. It's an order of common, what you see the most. And you start at whatever layer is presenting. So for an angry person, you would start at the top with anger. But that's not the main emotion. The main emotion is going to be in one of those layers underneath, probably at the bottom, feeling abandoned, betrayed, and unloved.
That's why I asked if that was the order.
Yeah.
And I know that shame.
Yeah, you start with what presents, and then you just start going digging and digging and digging.
I see.
Reflecting. And so that's your structure. That's how you know where you are, and you move from layer to layer. You might go from anger or upset or annoyance or with frustration down to anxiety. And then you might bounce up to disrespect, and you might bounce down to feeling a little humiliated or embarrassed. You might bounce back up to anger, and then you might bounce back down all the way to the bottom, feeling abandoned, betrayed, and unloved. You just go wherever they go. And the more you help this person process their emotional experience unconsciously, the deeper you go and the faster they calm down.
Not only that, I think, I'm putting myself in your shoes as you talk about that. I think you build trust if you start to identify, and this is so important. You're defensive if you don't have emotional trust that you go, oh, you know what? I've had girlfriends say this to me over the years all the time is, if I tell you that one day you'll use it against me.
Right.
No trust there.
No trust. Right. So what this does, I call this listening another person into existence. Listening another person into existence. And what this does is it builds instant trust, instant intimacy, instant closeness. Because when you listen another person into existence by validating their emotions in the moment, they feel for the first time in their lives like they have been deeply heard, and you get them. And you get them in a very, very deep way. Extremely powerful. And if this is, it's so powerful, it's a foundational skill that I think every person needs to master. And it's just as applicable in our business and professional lives as it is in our personal lives. And this is the first skill we teach our inmates, our incarcerated students. And when they learn this skill and master it, they completely change. They go from being hard cases to normal human beings. It takes about 6 weeks. And they go through this transformation, and they're completely changed. And it happens every single time. There isn't one student that I've ever had that didn't go through the transformation.
I think I understand something here about when you have to be vulnerable in order to be strong. This is when...
soft to be strong,
Yeah, this is when...
There it is.
It's coming together because, like you talked about, first, don't listen to the words that you're going to, listen, that if you do, you're going to hear some triggering things and all that.
Right.
Well, this is where you open up your heart. You take a few shots. You do. I mean,
but you don't. If you ignore the words, you're not going to get triggered. And the moment that you drop into really focusing on somebody else's emotional experience, you put a bubble around yourself that protects you from being upset. And you see, and that's where, and then out of that emerges compassion. And you're no longer worried about your own ego being hurt. Now you hold compassion for them. Oh, you're really emotional. You're really upset. Let me help reflect and help you process this. I mean, this is what you're saying to yourself. And now all of a sudden, because you've taken the courage to not worry about yourself, but to think about the other person's emotions and reflect them, now you are vulnerable and powerful.
I totally.
Soft and strong. And it works every single time without fail. Otherwise, we couldn't use it in the prisons.
And again, I'll say, I think it's because you build trust. You build emotional trust.
Well, that flows from, you're right, but it flows from the process. It flows from the process.
A couple of weeks ago, I did an interview like this with Dr. Stephen Treziak, author of Wonder Drug and before that, Compassionomics. And it's all about everything he's done is science-based on compassion and its ability to kill burnout, to build your relationships. But the amount of dopamine and serotonin and all that you get from everything you're talking about right there, being compassionate with somebody that's super close to you, first and foremost, is the biggest one. Like it just triggers all the good stuff.
And here's what makes me different from all these other guys. Everybody else will tell you what to do. They'll tell you, well, you have to be compassionate. Oh, you have to show empathy. Oh, you have to be emotionally intelligent.
Easier said.
They're giving you the whats, but not the hows.
Yeah.
And what I teach is the how. This is how you do it. And when you do this, all these things flow from the activity of actually listening to and reflecting back somebody's emotions. And you have to overcome a lot of cultural hurdles because we are taught that emotions are bad, they're vulnerable, they're weak, they're irrational. This whole myth of rationality, is totally wrong. We've been taught this for 4,000 years, so it's very difficult to discard what seems to be conventional wisdom when it's actually false and there's no science to support it. And what the truth is, we're 98% emotional and only 2% rational. So we have to overcome that baggage. And that's why I coach and teach this, is because people need the coaching and the support for the first couple of weeks to overcome the fear of and the awkwardness of telling somebody how they feel, because it feels very unnatural until you get it, and then you'll never go back, because it's well, of course, this is the only way you can be.
Well, we're talking about with you, as soon as you start practicing this and you start getting this incredible feedback for the first time,
that's
you're
right.
Getting your own dopamine hits.
That's right. That's why it's so self-affirming, and you need the help of a coach for the first couple of weeks to help you overcome the fear of looking like an idiot, of being patronizing, of being rude, of being vulnerable and afraid that you're going to get attacked. You need some help with that. You need support. Then once you get past that first 2 or 3 weeks, then it's a self-affirming practice, and you just get stronger and stronger at it.
Okay, so I want to take this to this level. It gets harder for you now. And I have an ultimate level, if we can get to it, that I think I'll stump you completely. Okay, on this one, this is the social media level, and I call that online road rage. All right, people have been learning to behave so badly.
That's right.
Advent in social media. People my age that I've known for years are acting like ill-behaved children, very insulting. Yeah.
They're acting like 6-year-olds.
Yeah.
There's no consequence. You can do whatever you want without consequence. You do not have to take personal responsibility for your behavior on social media.
But you would think that we would be so conditioned by now.
No. Remember, 98% of all families are emotionally dysfunctional. The implication there, the unstated truth, is that most people stop emotionally maturing at 6 years old, 6 to 8 years old. And we grow into these physical adult bodies. We come up with coping mechanisms to make it look like we're really cool and we're all put together. But in fact, we are emotional 6-year-olds. And when the veneer is stripped away, we go back to being 6 years old. Wow. And that's what you're seeing on social media. Now, here's a really cool thing. I have a pretty big social media platform. I'm on a lot of platforms, but I get snarky comments. Not so much now, but all you do is label their emotions. So somebody comes in and said, this is just a big pile of horse shit or something like that, right? Or some really snarky, mean comment. I said, oh, you're really angry? I write this out. I comment. You're frustrated, you're angry, you feel disrespected, you don't feel appreciated, you don't feel heard, you're really worried and concerned, and you're sad, and you feel completely unloved. I will actually type that out in the comment. They go away forever.
Oh my God, really?
Again.
I will try that. But I don't.
It works well in texting too. So if somebody texts you a snarky message, just reflect back what their emotions are in the moment. You are whatever. You feel disrespected and angry.
That's really good advice, because these are such low levels of communication when you can't look somebody in the eye, you can't see their emotion, you can't hear the inflection. You can't hear the inflection of their voice, though.
You can't. That's right. You're missing a lot of data.
Yes.
But you can infer a lot of data.
That's the problem, because we always run with the worst.
Well, but if you go with the written word, in order for somebody to convey an emotion in writing, they have to use certain phrases and certain words that are emotional in nature. So they're making a snarky, disrespectful, insulting comment. They have to be insulting and snarky and disrespectful and use language that way. So in this case, you're not ignoring the words. You're ignoring the content of the words and reflecting on the emotions behind the words.
Okay, totally get that. Now, what if you're this is real life stuff here, dealing with a client via email that I don't know that well, but I'm getting all the snark out of that. And, they're my customer, so I have to be but it's just oozing through the verbiage of the email. Right. How do I, and I don't tell them, you're feeling ashamed, you're feeling guilt, you must have had a shitty childhood.
Well, you have to use discernment when you do this.
Yeah.
And you only go as deep as is appropriate for the context, relationship and situation. And there are some situations where you won't go deep at all. You'll only go 2 layers, 3 layers, maybe. I don't get phone calls at all except when I'm on podcasts.
That's okay. It makes you look really important.
Yeah. So you do the anger, disrespect, and fear, and that's it. You don't go any deeper. And in an email, you can still respond back. If somebody sends you an upsetting email, you say, oh, Charles, you're upset and angry and feel frustrated because you don't feel heard. Stop. And that's all you do. And then you say, let's arrange for a Zoom call to talk about that.
Zoom has been wonderful for businesses.
That's right.
It truly is. It's a much better form of communication.
I agree. And the beauty about Zoom is it's much easier to read emotions over Zoom than it is in person.
Yeah, that's a point. Yeah, look somebody in the eye.
We're not distracted by everything going on around us.
Yeah.
And all we can do is just focus on what this person is feeling and experiencing.
All right, you ready to get stumped?
Sure. I always like to get stumped. It's a learning experience.
All right. So because everything that I've heard you talk about has been really, really good, spot on stuff, but it's interpersonal. With me, I battled anger my whole life on a personal level because of what I mirrored from my father. I witnessed my father for obviously as long as I could remember being pissed off at the universe for making things go badly. And so I've learned it's a victim mentality right there.
Sure it is.
Yeah. So I've been conditioned to that as well. And it's like, I try to overcompensate. I know that you're Murphy's Law. I know that you're going to try to make this go wrong. And, God damn it, you just did it. And, okay, you going to deal with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's what I want you to do. Every time you feel that anger come up, doesn't matter how often it is, all I want you to do is acknowledge your anger. I am really angry. Yeah. Then I want you to go into the layers. All right, what else am I feeling besides angry? I feel disrespected. I feel cheated. I feel like somebody is taking something away from me that I deserve, and that really pisses me off. And I'm a little anxious and worried. And I'm a little sad because I don't like being angry and I'm missing something. And really, in this moment, with this anger, I don't feel loved. I feel abandoned, and I don't even feel like I'm worthy of love from other people. Just say that to yourself every single time you feel angry.
I have to say that I'm embarrassed by it, if that's the right word. I don't like it.
Yes. And let me explain why. Of course, it's awkward, and it's very uncomfortable. You've been taught that emotions are bad. You've been taught that to feel anything is to make you weak, especially as a man. You've been taught that you've got to be a rugged individualist, that you've got to be stoic, that you've got to push through this bullshit and just stuff it down, because that's what it means to be tough and resilient, and that's all wrong.
Oh, I believe that.
All it does is create more pain and more agony. Be courageous enough and vulnerable enough to acknowledge. You don't have to say this to anybody else other than yourself, and you can even write it down on a piece of paper and then throw the paper away if you need to. But acknowledge your own emotional experience as deeply as you can every time you feel that anger come up. And don't leave it alone at just the anger. Oh, I'm really pissed off right now. Okay, I'm really pissed off, but I know there's 6 other emotions underneath that. What are they? And you structure the data. You go through the disrespect emotions, and then you go through the fear emotions, and then you go through the shame, humiliation, embarrassment, and grief, and sadness, and abandonment. You go through them all, and just by rote, just go through them, and some will click. Oh, that's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling unappreciated. I'm feeling unsupported. I feel cheated. I feel betrayed. Oh, that's it. I get it. And all of a sudden, the anger goes away.
Okay, I'm definitely going to try that.
I'm really trying. Overcome your fear and the awkwardness and the fear that you have. And here's one of the things, again, why I have to coach people through this is because we've been taught that emotions are so evil. And so we have suppressed all of these negative emotions inside ourselves as adults for years and years and years and years. And we got this cauldron of painful, uncomfortable emotions that are inside us that we've never processed before. And we have a fear that if we dive into that cesspool, we'll never come out. Or we will lose what it is that we value the most, our resilience and strength, and toughness. And the fact of the matter is that the resilience and toughness that you experience now is like a very thin sheet of plaster with no backing on it. It'll shatter in a heartbeat. When you get in and dive into that emotional pool and start acknowledging all of your emotions, you gain a strength that goes beyond steel. Again, the Tai Chi paradox: soft to be strong, vulnerable to be powerful. But you have to experience it in order to learn it.
That wasn't lost on me.
You have to experience it, and that means you have to have courage.
Yeah.
I had to go through this. I mean, I was just like you. I had all this anger from being so disabled and nobody caring for me and nobody figuring out how to help me, and I had to learn everything on my own, and it was physically painful and emotionally painful and incredibly frustrating. Imagine being 5 years old and barely being able to run and keeping up with all your friends, and not being blind, trying out for Little League baseball, couldn't see the baseball. Because I didn't have glasses until finally the 4th grade. They finally figured out that my vision was 2400. you know,
I don't know what
what
that
are you feeling in
means.
school? You know, I mean,
So to this day, well, you probably had surgery on your eyes.
oh yeah, I got these big thick glasses. That was of course a buzzkill for the girls too.
Yeah.
I was nerdy long before nerdiness was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but ultimately, yeah, finally got some later in life contact lenses, but then we started getting, you get this thing called a corneal intrusion, lack of oxygen to the eye, so that I couldn't wear contacts anymore. But that was when our K surgery came in. They did our K surgery. I mean, it was like overnight miracle. I
So
went
what?
from blind to perfect vision,
Really?
and then LASIK came in, and we had to do corrections 15 years later. And then a couple of years ago, I got cataract surgery. I had early onset cataracts, and my ophthalmologist said, "Let's just get rid of those things. You're young, you're healthy. This is the time to do it. They'll never bother you again." And it's not.
Well,
Got
great
great
story.
vision.
Hey, I got to ask you something on a personal level. When I just looking you up and stuff, your wife does energy work, right?
Yes, she does.
That's very interesting. I mean, I don't know. You set the stage for yourself as being this macho tough guy and all of that.
I'm an energy practitioner too. I'm a certified pranic healer, Arhatic yoga. Practiced Arhatic yoga for a long time. So yeah, and the practice, everything I'm talking about has a very deep spiritual component to it that I don't talk about much, but it's there. Yes, and I'm married to an enlightened being.
That's really interesting. How long have you been married?
15 years.
Nice. Congratulations. Oh, that sounds amazing. And well, you sound okay. So you didn't get married at 40 when you're being kicked out of martial arts because you're too aggressive.
I got married 3 years. My first marriage was at 37. I got married at 37. That marriage lasted 17 years, and then that fell apart for a lot of different reasons. Partly because I was still immature. Then I was going through this major growth spurt. I had a lot of problems. Still had a lot of problems. I mean, remember 50. It was 50 when I really started to grow up. I was born at 50. And
I totally relate, man. 56 now. And
yeah, changes. Everything changes for the better. For the better.
You got to make the effort though, too,
Yeah, I don't want to go back to being 22 years old.
No.
And I'm taking care of I'm 71 now, but I've got the body of a 55-year-old.
Yeah, you look amazing. You look really amazing.
So you just take care of yourself and it all flows.
And that's what this podcast is about. It's about getting a little bit better professionally and personally every day, just a little bit better. Right. So I really appreciate it. You certainly helped me, and maybe through that you helped a couple of listeners out there.
Oh, good, Barry. I knew this was going to be a great conversation.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind doing it again. Come out with another book.
I don't know. I've written 4. I don't know.
But I would like to do it again. I could talk to you forever.
Absolutely. Anytime you want to.
All right.
Reach out and we'll talk again.
All right. And guys, all kinds of links for Doug will be in the show notes. So I thank you. And please go to over50startingover.com, sign up and subscribe to YouTube or whatever. But at over50startingover.com, if you sign up, you'll get all this to your email box as it happens. You won't miss anything. All right, Doug. Thanks a bunch. You have a great day.
You're welcome, Barry. Thank you.
All right. Bye.